anti-inflammation workshop. If you look at the handout that I've given you, you see that I reference it as a self-mastery effort. And before we get started, I wanted to thank Ozzy from Vitality Wellness Center for giving us the opportunity to come together today and share some information. I want it to be collaborative also. If you have something that you'd like to share, please we'll try to find opportunity to reference that, etc. And before we get started, I want to explain a principle. And I'll use the principle within the workshop. And the principle, I didn't invent duality. Duality is something that a lot of people have a certain awareness of. But what I did do is I developed a system that you can use in order to draw contrast in your life and make determinations of where you would like to be. And if you go to page 14 in this handout, you'll see what I'm talking about. I'm not going to read page 14, but the concept will always be there, and I expect that this is something that you reference in your mind in the future, and you go back to this handout for more than one purpose. But duality is the concept of analyzing where we are versus where we would like to be. So I'm going to give you an example. If someone were to accuse you of being something, let's say somebody was to accuse you of being selfish, we have a way to, the person might even tell you in an ugly way, with an ugly tone, they might be yelling at you, but it's an opportunity for you to determine, is this person full of crap? Or are they trying to tell me something that I need to be listening to? And so if we take the word and we sit down and we look at a dictionary, and then we look at a few synonyms and a few antonyms, we can determine if it's true or not. And if it is true, let's say I determine I am selfish, meaning I neglect my friends and family. And I would prefer not to be. I can, again, draw some contrast. And let's say I determine that generosity is an attribute that I'd rather emulate. Do you see what I'm talking about now? Everything's on a plane. And so everything exists on a spectrum. Alcoholism, you name it. Selfishness, arrogance, whatever it is. Everything exists on a plane. And I describe it like a 33-inch record that you're balancing on your finger. The old school records with a little hole in the middle. And imagine a drop of water that comes down and it tilts the record. Well, where that water drops is where our bias lies. The bias of our selfishness or whatever it is that we're struggling with. When we draw the spectrum, we can now see, I want to be over there. And we can't see that we're off base. We can't see that we're out of balance. But when we start making steps towards that direction, we can bring it in balance. Sometimes you have to bring things into balance before you understand that they were ever out of balance in the first place. Does this make sense? So this is the concept that I want you to keep in mind. And if we approach this, because something like selfishness can be something ugly that we have to look at. So I'm not being a motivational speaker. I'm not speaking like Tony Robbins and make everybody feel good and get up and scream and yell and all this. I would prefer that you approach this almost like Sunday school. Sunday school in the way that we have a handout, and we will go over details in the handout, but also in the way that I want you to be honest and humble with yourself so that you can come to real terms with whatever it is you want to use this duality system with. Today we're just going to use it with our inflammation approach. So try to have open mind, try to be honest with yourself, and try to look for opportunities to make baby steps to where you want to be. No matter what it is. It doesn't matter if it's inflammation or whatever it is. You can use that. You get it. Perfect. So I want to define inflammation first. And again, I told you guys it's going to kind of be like Sunday school. So that's why I have the handout, and that's why everybody has a pencil, so you can follow along, and we can actually make some notes as we go. So, by the way, everybody seems dead. Can we smile a little bit? Where's Ozzy? Can we thank him for being here or something? Can we get one whoop whoop in the back?
Thank you, Ozzy.
Thank you.
All right. Awesome.
I got the lunch ready.
Are you bringing lunch?
I was told we're going to have lunch here.
Oh, I don't know.
Barbecue or something like that? No?
Maybe the Maris. I don't know. She asked me about drinks and snacks, and I was like, I haven't. You know women, they make things fancier.
I'm joking.
Okay, perfect. So first, let's start start by defining what is inflammation. Basically, it's a I'll do this. It is a response. Our body has several systems to help repair and prevent injuries, and inflammation is one such system. Our immune system sends out first responders, which are inflammatory cells and cytokines. They're related to white blood cells that protect our body from harmful agents and pathogens, damaged cells, irritants, things like this. Inflammation versus infection can be confused. There are actually two different reactions. Infection is caused by a virus, fungus, or bacteria, while infection, exactly, versus inflammation, which is the body's response to infection. When you feel inflammation, like joint pain, redness, and sensitivity, it's our body trying to heal itself. Have you ever seen somebody eat something and they get red, break out, and they'll tell kids, hey, if you clean up your diet, it's less acne, stuff like this? This is our body's response to it. Inflammation causes pain, and the swelling and buildup of inflamed tissues press against nerve endings. As long as this persists, the pain persists. Pain results in stiffness related to guarding, discomfort, and sometimes agony. People describe it as soreness, achy, tender, tight, and sometimes excruciating. Most people learn to cope with inflammation rather than do anything about it. And that's what's happening in society today. When we see people that are bloated, it's inflammation. How many of you guys have gone to Europe and said, hey, I ate whatever I want, I paid no attention to caloric intake, and I lost weight? What's the difference?
Food.
Exactly. It's our food. It's our quality of food versus their quality of food. And a lot of people, they'll write off their aches and pains as getting old. They'll just accept it as, well, I'm aging, rather than doing something about it. So, but is it really that hard to resolve? So the kinds of inflammation. Acute inflammation. This is where symptoms occur rapidly. You may fall, bump your elbow, something like this. So an infection, anything that ends with itis, bronchitis, gastritis, laryngitis, injury, blunt trauma, bruises, cuts, scratches, heavily salted and preserved foods. Does anybody, or can you relate to that? When you ever eat Chinese food, training or lack of movement. So we can overdo something, like jiu-jitsu people, and we can also just sit around and do nothing, and then you get tired. How many people understand that hey, if I get up and do something, I don't have the same sensations as if I sat around? So acute inflammation is temporary and subsides naturally as long as the cause does not persist and the healing process is allowed to occur uninterrupted. So that's ideal situation. But chronic inflammation is really what we suffer from. It's when acute inflammation is succumbed with persistent circumstances. Then chronic inflammation establishes. It can last for months or years. Eventually, our immune system begins to attack itself, and a low-intensity irritant becomes persistent. Does anybody know what autoimmune is? Have you ever heard of it? This is what this is. The autoimmune
when
wasn't
your body attacks itself.
exactly. We'll go into more specifics of autoimmune in a little bit later with some examples of what's happening. So, allergic reactions. This is another type of inflammation that we can experience, and this is when something harmless is an irritant to somebody. So nuts, odd things like pollen. It shouldn't affect us. But there's certain people that their body says, oh, this is an invader, and I need to have a response. Sometimes there's a simple solution like Benadryl. Some people have to carry an EpiPen to intervene. Some people it's deadly. So it's an autoimmune response. In an autoimmune response, tissue destruction occurs. With allergies, the immune system overreacts to a harmless allergen. Both result in inflammation. An autoimmune disorder is a disease or a condition in which the immune system mistakenly attacks the body. When we sense foreign invaders, we send out our cytokines, and they get involved, creating this inflammation within the body. Some antibodies we have proteins that are antibodies, and sometimes they target only one organ. For example, type 1 diabetes, it damages the pancreas. Psoriasis is the skin. You have lupus. People can die from lupus. And does anybody know anybody with lupus?
My best friend.
Your best friend? Yeah, it's really dangerous, and it's controlled with when we start watching and living an anti-inflammation lifestyle. Our autoimmune disorders, our bloating, all of these things can subside. So the type 1 diabetes, it's an organ-specific autoimmune disease. The pancreas produces a hormone insulin that regulates blood sugar. What insulin really is a door that allows the upload of sugar into the blood first, then to the muscle in the form of glycogen. Some glycogen will go into the liver, and then when we have surplus, then it goes to storage, fat stores. So it's the door that opens every single one of those in that order. So if a diabetic has low blood sugar and you give them soda or whatever, juice, within moments you can test and you can detect that blood sugar has gone up. Then the upload to the muscle, and then eventually any surplus, we're making deposits into a body bank basically. Does this make sense? Lupus is the most common SLE is the most common type of lupus. It's an autoimmune disease in which the immune system attacks its own tissues, causing widespread inflammation, tissue damage, and tissue damage in the affected organs. It can affect joint, skin, brain, lungs, kidneys, and blood vessels. There's no cure for lupus, but medical interventions and mainly food choices can control it. Psoriasis and arthritis, we spoke about that. Rheumatoid arthritis. And there are no cures for the approximately 80 known. There's 82 known that we know of. There's only medical interventions and there's lifestyle changes that we can make in order to manage. And chronic inflammation stimulates this autoimmunity. If you go to page 4, you're going to see me, because all my qualifications is I used to be a fat guy that fixed myself. That's really it. That's me.
Come on.
So who doesn't recognize me? Yeah. And I'm not a selfie person, so how these even got in here, how I ever took selfies, when I found the picture of myself like that, I was like, what was I doing? Anyway. So due to the recent epidemic of obesity, this has been since the 1980s. If you go back prior to the 1980s and look at Brady Bunch or anything on television, imagine going into Publix and seeing Mike Brady and his family. It would be a shock. Like, look at those skinny people walking around. It doesn't even exist anymore. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's a modern problem that is only a few decades old. The study of systematic inflammation is fairly new, Researchers are still working to understand the different mechanisms and implications, but it is clear that the process of inflammation is an immune response. Chronic inflammation occurs when specialized metabolic cells, or adipose cells or fat cells, maintain themselves in a state of injury and begin an inflammatory process, disrupting metabolic homeostasis. The immune system recognizes injury and sends out these cytokines. The cytokines travel to these fat cells, as well as to the liver and to the pancreas. It prompts more immune cells that infiltrate metabolic tissues, and so it's supercharging itself along the way. It's getting worse and worse and worse. It's feeding off of itself. Two different lipids become elevated from the foods we eat. These lipids contribute to the pathology of obesity by driving the cellular infiltration of pro-inflammatory macrophages, while gut health is also a contributing factor to overall inflammation. There's a distinct association between increased weight gain and increased inflammation. When you address inflammation, a byproduct of it is you just lose weight. So for me, you see these people that they'll say, all I got to do is get back in the gym. So that means their strategy is to outrun calories. And this is when you're looking for a vanity solution to inflammation or being overweight. Then you have, but when you understand that you can control what you eat, and we're kind of being brainwashed, we're being tricked into doing this for, I don't want to seem anti-capitalistic, but it is for capitalistic reasons that we're being tricked into this. So inflammation is encouraged by overindulgence and does not resolve itself, allowing inflammation to become chronic. So we actually give inflammation permission to exist within us. So there are archetypes of inflammation that exist. And Doritos, Oreos, Cheetos, these are examples that that researchers use to try to replicate. So a gentleman named Stephen Weatherly is a food scientist and author of Why Humans Like Junk Food, explained to the New York Times how nacho cheese Doritos are an archetype of the inflammation-causing addictive process. What's their motto? You can't eat just one. And they know you can't. Doritos are engineered so you never feel like you had enough. How exactly do they do that? The chips have a powerful savory flavor known as umami, which is a category of taste associated with MSG, and also what he calls long hang time flavors like garlic that create lingering smell and stimulate memories. The recipe balances these powerful tastes so well that no single flavor overpowers and lingers in the mind after you've eaten a chip. This avoids what scientists call sensory-specific satiety, or the feeling of fullness caused by a dominant flavor. You wouldn't eat a whole bag of rosemary chips, but we do eat these nacho cheese Doritos. This is a true story, and Monica is a witness to it. A woman at Body Electric once told her there's no size of Doritos that is not snack size to her. She could literally take a family size bag, sit down to binge watch something, and finish the whole dang thing. Can anybody relate to that? Understand what we're talking? Yeah, exactly. Amen. Maybe we'll slay. I compared this to Sunday school, so maybe we'll have come to Jesus type moments and slaying demon moments here today. Exactly. Two acids, lactic and citric, get saliva flowing, which triggers the impulse to eat. Another ingredient, buttermilk, and the next time you eat a Dorito, I swear you're going to taste buttermilk now that you've read this, because I do. Since I wrote this and I put this together, now when I eat a Dorito, I swear I can taste the buttermilk. Anyway, buttermilk delivers even more lactic acid. Doritos dust have even more of an impact if you lick it right from your fingertips without the chip to dilute it. Who's done this? Are you kidding me? Who takes the bag and knocks the crumbs into... Yes!
You gotta go, but one by one.
Yes! To maximize the pleasure, half of the calories in Doritos come from fat. With that ratio, it feels like the chip melts in your mouth and your brain is tricked into thinking the calories have vanished. This is called vanishing caloric density, and it also exists with cotton candy. To boot, there are artificial colorings. Now we're talking about marketing. We're talking, there's the colors and everything else associated in order to entice you. But in short, the food industry doesn't care if you live in a state of chronic inflammation or pain or loss of quality of life, or even if we suffer from subsequent medical expenditures. As a method to separate us from our money, corporate researchers are not only hacking but hijacking our nature. Just like the casino wins a minimum of 51% of the time, we are at a high probability risk of manipulation if we just have one Dorito. That motto, that tagline is true. You can't just have one. Processed foods are developed so you feel unsatiated and you continue to eat more. So we're riding on a health crisis conveyor belt. Once the food industry gets done with you, you graduate to the medical industry. Who they don't, and guess what they don't do? They don't tell you. I'm telling you the truth right now. I've worked at Stretch Lab, yoga teacher. You see these people. Most knee and hip replacements would be unnecessary if the doctor was honest and said, go home and lose 100 pounds. Who was it were we talking to? Oh, it was Ken, one of the paramedics. He runs calls on these addicts. And he said, this is how the story goes. The person gets an operation. They get addicted to the opiates. They lose their house. They lose their marriage. They're living on the street. They're taking fentanyl. And it started with an operation that they probably didn't need in the first place if they could manage themselves differently. So the way that we see things is very important. And in the timeline, this is where I'm going to try to invoke the motivation part. Because we haven't got to the good stuff yet. In the timeline of known history, humans have experienced a hard existence. Whether a pioneering colonist, a warring tribe member, or modest peasant, even kings did not live the quality of life that people on welfare do in this country today. We don't have rampant hunger anywhere in North America. People have reasonable access to health care, and we don't experience pestilence and plagues of just a few centuries back. We don't have to worry about our village being raided by a neighboring aggressor. We live in relative safety. But what does everybody say? Oh, the Mexicans. Oh, the... You see where I'm going with this? We're benefiting from all the development of previous generations that came before us. We have conquered nature. We don't hunt or grow our food anymore. You can literally have food delivered. We can call right now and have a complete catered anything delivered within an hour for all of us. That with more food than the mind can conceive. What's the one commercial? There's the one app where they just keep ordering things and ordering things. Do you know which one I'm talking about? It might have been right before the pandemic. It was one of the DoorDash or something like this. They're just ordering food like it's a hobby or something. We don't have, by the way, because this is not in this workshop, we don't have feast and famine anymore. Used to, you had seasons that you would eat in. We don't do that anymore. There is no famine. There's no lean winter anymore. It's all the time. Eat, snack, One of the things that was shocking to me when I was fasting, because for me, your why is important. Why you don't want inflammation in your body is, you have to want it. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. My why was really important. I wanted to be able to walk again. I couldn't go to the mailbox. I couldn't, necessarily clean, vacuum, do dishes and just do simple things. And the whole time I'm laying on my back, I was 10 months total. It was a 2-month window, a 2-month window, and then a 6-month window. I would question, what will you be able to do again? Will you do jujitsu again? Will you, push a lawnmower? Just basic things that people take for granted. So your why, you have to discover what that is, and and it will change. Because once you start moving and you get rid of inflammation, you're like, wow, I enjoy doing this. You will discover different things that you didn't know that you would have new access to. So we're benefiting from all the development of previous generations that came before us, nature contra. Our ancestors endured hard times that we can't even imagine. In modern times, disease and illness are imposed upon us in the name of profit, while it's disguised as freedom. The biggest threat to our health and well-being is our own food industry. We sit around complaining about life and constantly imagine worst-case scenarios, as if we live in a time of epidemic depression and anxiety. It's out of control. We're the weakest we've ever been in all of human history, mentally and physically. We live in the greatest time that the human species has ever lived. But all we think about is what we don't have. It's a big thing right now with young girls having depression and problems, mental health problems, because of their time on social media. They're thinking about what they don't have rather than appreciating what they do. So again, we're just detached from all of this, while other people decide our behavior patterns for us. If the vet told you that your pet was overweight, your dog or your cat, and their comfort and their health is being compromised, would you ask the vet to give me a pill to give to the dog, or would you change the habits for the animal? But what do you do for yourself? I want a pill. We don't want to change. We're too comfortable. We are ruled by our routines, patterns, habits. Addiction is a compulsive, chronic, physiological or psychological need for a habit-forming substance, behavior, or activity having harmful physical, psychological, or social effects. We're addicted to this stuff. You see? And at the same time, we're the weakest we've ever been, and we don't know how to do hard things. We had ancestors that conquered so many things, but we can't resist Arby's French fries. Think about what your parents and your grandparents did in their lifetime, and we cannot not go through the drive-thru. You see? So how do we overcome the dilemma of weakness? The epidemic of chronic inflammation coexists with the downfall of mental toughness. If we look to one of the many of our strongest models of human character, it's been cultivated through wrestlers and boxers. I use this example because I'm a jiu-jitsu practitioner, and even if you do things like yoga, these things are hard. Once you learn to wrestle and stand in front of an opponent, everything else is simple. Ask him. He knows. Problems are simple compared to what you face when you're trying to duel another opponent and there's certain things on the line. We take the kicking and punching out of modern day sports jiu-jitsu. So there's you can make it into a competition. That's why the Gracie family did that. They said, man, they came from to give you a little bit of history, I'm getting a little bit sidetracked here. The Gracie family was the Barnum Bailey family of Brazil. but their traveling circus or whatever was prize fighting. And this guy comes from Japan, ends up teaching the kids in the Gracie family jiu-jitsu, and because they had this business acumen concerning this prize fighting, they're like, man, we could turn this into something completely different and start this. What they did, they actually started the UFC, but that's a different story, and I don't want to get sidetracked. But I find it amazing that all these history of yoga and everything. So without combat sports, how do we toughen the mind? Number one is awareness. If we know and understand, this is the first step, is the awareness step here. If we know and understand that food is the number one way to either give us inflammation or to control inflammation, we can do something about it. So it's the difference of practicing mindfulness versus mindlessness. Awareness versus not knowing, and caring versus not caring. Number two is we have to experiment. You've got to be willing to do something different. And what I do for me is not what you would do for you. I'll give you a perfect example. The three proteins that I like to eat are bone broth, eggs, and sardines. If I tell that to somebody, and if I said, hey, here's my plan, you mimic it. I don't like any of these things. You see? So your solution has to be your solution. It's different for everybody. And number three, it's consistency. You've got to be consistent. If you come in here and you do one float take session, you might come out and go, it was great. The magnesium upload and my muscles feel great. So you had one experience. But if you do it consistently, something else happens. Now you're on a different path. So either the mind controls the body or the body controls the mind. And we get into more detail here. So awareness. So this is the first step. And I don't want to get into too much biology, but I do a little bit at certain points, okay? But I try to simplify it so that everybody can understand. So the first thing is we've got to avoid carbs and refined sugars. Because of the process that I just told you. We talked about insulin, and we talked about how it's this delivery mechanism. Well, if we minimize our insulin response, guess what? Now we're more in balance, and there's less storage surplus. And now, instead of making deposits, we occasionally can start getting into withdrawals. And there's a way to do that, and we'll talk about that later, a specific way. Foods that are anti-inflammatory in nature have alkaline properties and restore pH balance of our body. Man, I think a lot of people understand alkaline versus acidity in our body. And we understand that an alkaline body is in a better state of homeostasis as opposed to a say again? Acidic, exactly. One of the things in this building that helps this process happen naturally is on the other side of the wall there, the PEMF bed. It actually alkalizes your blood and your tissues. It's very interesting. And there's a way that we can use these tools here to start those baby steps. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. Hydration. Hydration keeps the body in good functioning balance, including the pH in our metabolism. Peppers, herbs, and spices. So you want to experiment with what you're putting in your food. Even mild activities, such as walking. You don't have to become a marathon runner. You don't have to do anything extreme. Just start moving your body. It encourages muscle activation that is associated with reduced inflammation, while sweating purges our body of toxins and bacteria associated with infection. A study conducted by Oxford and Yale researchers found regular exercise boost one's mental health more than a comfortable salary. Acute cortisol exposure is anti-inflammatory in nature. However, chronic stress and tension leads to prolonged exposure to cortisol, which stimulates pro-inflammation. So I'm going to tell you a story. One time I was giving a workshop, and this woman came. I'd never met her before. She saw the advertisement. It was at the Salt Suite over here in Seminole. And she shows up, and so during that setting's a little bit more intimate, and we had a lot more conversation going on. And her job was with the Postal Service, and she was, you know, these people that open the request and complaint box and have to filter through it. But that was like her job. She had to deal with that person's touching me, or that person said something I don't like, or you see what I mean? And she was telling me. First, she described her body. She was like, "Well, I'm here because I have this, constant joint pain in my neck," and she's going on and on and on. And then she starts telling me about her job, and I was like, "Well, you don't want to be there. That's fight or flight. That's cortisol. That's what stress is. But you can't run away from it because it's your job. You got to be there every day." So there are environmental factors that can also contribute to our inflammation. So if I walk around the corner in the jungle and there's a cobra in front of me, okay, I don't want to confront it. I get my rush of cortisol and my adrenaline, and I can back away. Or maybe for me it's dinner, and I choose I'm going to aggress and fight it and take it home. So one of my two responses are there. But we live in places, we live in a time. Imagine you're a child, and you live in a home, and in that home, your dad's a drunk, and he's trying to burn down the house all the time, and there's a lot of yelling and screaming going on, and you can't concentrate. Maybe you don't live in a war zone with bombs going off, but you're in a place that you don't want to be. You can't run, you can't fight, you're just there. So these are the type of circumstances that modern people find themselves in, and it's a contributor to our inflammation also. I gotta put my glasses back on. I hate this. Go back and forth. Some types of fat. Did I skip? Yes, I did. 9. I'm on page 9 now. Diet models that fight inflammation. So I go through these because, again, I want to give you guys choices, and I want to give you guys options, and I want you to just consider what would it look like. So now we're on our duality spectrum record player. We're standing wherever our bias is, and we're starting to look around, and we're starting to make a map. So we can draw a course somewhere. Where are we going with this? That's what I want you to think about here. What works for you? What can you do for yourself? Okay? So intermediate fasting, I bring it up and I say what I just said because it's not for everybody. It's like a cold plunge. Cold plunge is the hardest thing to do in this building. It's not for everybody. And it should be. However, even if fasting is not something within your toolbox of addressing inflammation, I honestly believe that everybody should know what it feels like to have an empty stomach. It's a different sensation than bloating. Imagine the bloating. It's Thanksgiving, and you have to do the thing where you undo your belt and maybe the top button of your pants, or you know what I'm talking about? This is a full feeling. We're trying to get you in a place where you feel the opposite, a contrast, the duality, something completely different than some place where you reside now, or some experiences that you're familiar with, maybe frequently. So when it comes to fasting, practitioners, what they may do is they'll do, a common one is a 16-8. 16 hours where you don't fast. You usually start before, you think about it before you go to bed. So let's say your cutoff is 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock the next morning is 12 hours. 4 more hours is 12 o'clock lunch. Skip breakfast, just have black coffee, etc. No sugar, no creamer, nothing that's going to provoke a metabolic reaction. drink water, and then you have your lunch, and then you have your 8-hour feeding window. Some people might do it like a 20-hour window of not eating and a 4-hour. Some people do it eat just one time a day. It's called OMAD, 1 meal a day. It's an acronym. So these are different, and there's if intermediate fasting interests you, it's something that I'm pretty familiar with. I've done as many as 2 and 3-day fast. The longest I've done was a 72, and I'd be glad to speak to somebody in more detail about that if something that is on your radar of a possibility. And there's something interesting that also happens when you intermediate fast. There's something called autophagy. And autophagy is a Greek word. It means self-eating. And so our body goes through a self-eating process where we're going into fat stores. And we're also eating other parts of our body. Imagine if this wall, every day, I come to this wall and I put another layer of paint and another layer of paint and another layer of paint and another layer of paint, and I'm always painting layers. And after a while, there's errors and there's deformities and there's imperfections, and I'm just putting more and more paint on top of it. I'm not sanding the wall down. I'm just putting layer. That's what's happening to us when we eat and eat and eat and eat and eat, and there's feast and feast and feast and feast, and there's never any famine. Those cells just build up in layers, imperfections and everything. Autophagy is like sandpaper to this, and it goes and it starts cleaning it up. It starts cleaning the wall up and takes away these damaged cells and proteins and whatnot. And it's one of the most powerful things, and it's very anti-inflammatory in nature, autophagy. If it's something that interests you, but it's kind of extreme and it's not for everybody. I put South Beach, keto, and paleo in the same category. I think everybody here is familiar with those. Okay. Why do I put them in the same category? Because they're 3 different strategies, but they all 3 do the same thing to our body. You're basically refraining from carbohydrates or regulating them a lot more closely. And of course, not only does it fight inflammation, you just happen to lose weight with it too. Mediterranean and DASH. We've all heard of the Mediterranean diet, I imagine? Not everybody's heard of DASH, I imagine. This is a high blood pressure strategy that you get a DASH diet recommendation from your doctor. That's the one that the medical community is familiar with and will prescribe to patients here and there. And what they do is they're just asking you to be balanced. They incorporate carbs, but they're asking you to do it in an intelligent, calorie counting approach. I personally think it's the hardest myself. I think that the carb restriction is really, once you get used to it, there's a logic behind it, and I might go into it a little bit later, but for me, it's the best. Here on this one, Atkins and carnivore diet. This is a type of keto. Everybody's familiar with Atkins? Everybody's familiar with carnivore? They're kind of the same thing. They are basically, you're focusing on a lot of fats, a lot of protein, and little to no carbs, if any at all in most cases. If they do, they might eat fruit or something that's it's certainly not going to be soda, but you get the logic. Carrots, things like this, small amounts of carbs or sugars. But the point at the bottom of page 10 is when it relates to the processed foods, like processed meats and stuff like that. You want to stick to whole foods in it. So if you go to 11, we're on key point number 2.
Yeah, didn't Atkins die of a massive coronary?
No, that's a rumor. He slipped and fell.
Really?
He was like on a sidewalk in New York City and slipped and fell and hurt himself and died from the fall. I think he hit his head. But I've heard this before, but I think they tried to spread this rumor in order to slander him. But yeah, he didn't. I heard the same thing, and I had to research it. Like, oh wow, is that true? And so there was a rumor that he died of a massive coronary or a stroke or something like that, related to this high fat.
I a lot of meat.
Well, they were trying to say that that he's clogged his arteries, basically, and created a clotting situation or something associated with all of this fat and whatnot. So, on the experimentation process, okay, the way I explain this is I call the body a body bank. Who in this room can relate to the idea that every year you're 2, 3, 4, 5 pounds heavier? Okay, so we can relate to it. So we're slowly incrementing ourselves into a worse state of health. Okay. What I like to challenge people to do is to slowly increment yourself in the other direction. I'm 3 years into my particular journey. And what I tell people, and what we have on the walls posted around here, and I say this several different ways. I say it 4 or 5 ways. I have a way of expressing the same sentiment, that there is no goal and there is no destination to what you're trying to accomplish. We're living life, for God's sakes. There's only a pathway. So let's use like samurai, which was the original way I heard this expressed. They don't have a goal. They have a path. Yogi doesn't have a goal. They have a path. Your wellness and the way you care for yourself, if you don't take control of it, somebody else is going to take control of it for you. And that's what we're living in this society and culture. People in boardrooms are making decisions on our behalf, and we're just going along with it. Okay, here's my money. Wow, this stuff's pretty good.
Tastes good.
Yeah. And they made it, they tricked us. And I go into a little bit of detail later on about how they trick us. And number 3 is consistency. So the way I explain consistency is, when does a teeter-totter tip? When the weight shifts to the other side. What do you have to do? You have to pass the 50% mark. If you pass the 50% mark, the teeter-totter will shift. So if I am like I was on the few pages back, if I'm this big and continuing to drink what I want and eat what I want, and tomorrow I say, man, I'm going to have a salad, is it going to disrupt this momentum? It doesn't do anything to it. It won't stop it. It's a freight train. It's going. If I am on a pathway of every year losing a few pounds, my momentum's going this way, and you guys come into town to cat sit, and you say, hey Jamie, come over and have some pizza and beer and chicken wings tonight. We're watching the UFC fight. If I have a chicken, pizza, and beer night with my friends, and my momentum's this way, is it going to interrupt anything? It doesn't stop it. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. I heard one of the guys I mentored under, he said a guy came to me one time, and he said, hey, I want to lose weight. And he said, well, how'd you get fat? And again, I don't want to focus on fat. I want to focus on inflammation, because this is a quality of life thing. He said, well, how'd you get fat? And of course, everybody has their story. And he said, but you know the real reason? And now this is the real reason why everybody is the reason why you're sitting here today, is momentum. All the things that you do take you to wherever you are. GhettoRig is here today because of all the things that they've done to make it happen. I'm here today because of all the momentum, whatever pathway that twisted and turned to go to Stretch Lab, to meet Ozzy, to have him offer me this position, and we're all here today. It's momentum. So you decide where that momentum goes. In the Buddhist terms, The Dharma wheel. The Dharma wheel takes you, it's where our routines and rituals and habits reside. And it's like a car, it's going someplace. If I wanted to go over there, I've got to turn the steering wheel. So let's go back to our teeter-totter. My strategy was this, or it's my maintenance strategy, I would like to say. My strategy in the beginning was 100% anti-inflammatory in every single thing I did. Once I got to a certain place, I had to go to a maintenance phase. So the maintenance phase, my maintenance phase, is probably what most people's initial strategy would look like. I would do a weekly cycle. And let's say it starts on Monday. The first thing about it is we think about January 1st. A lot of people have resolutions on January 1st. But how long do they really last?
Till the second, yeah.
Exactly. So my thought was, well, I don't want to have an annual way of renewing. But this weekly cycle works pretty good. And it's kind of the way we live, and it's kind of the way we structure our lives anyway. So it's a shorter, compressed amount of time. So let's give you examples, start on Monday. So if Monday through Thursday, 4 days of the week versus 3, 50% teeter-totter, I have a certain practice that I put together for myself. I get up Friday, and I know I'm going to start just like Monday through Thursday. I'm going to still have black coffee, no sugar, no nothing to provoke a metabolic reaction. Knowing that by the end of the evening, somebody might say, hey, come over to a social. It was all happy hour, beer and pizza night on Saturday with the UFC fights or whatever it is. Sunday, you're not going to blow up Friday, Saturday, and Sunday because of all the things that you learn along the way. Does this make sense? So it gets you over. And then Monday comes around, and I suggest that you do a ritual. Now, my ritual at the time, it's different now because it's changed, is I was doing a hot yoga class. I would go to Body Electric, and I would start off with this purge, the kicking off the week, feeling good. It's a pretty cool routine, and you get it, right? And it kind of sets me up. It puts my mind back into Monday through Thursday. This is what you're going to do. Does this make sense? Yeah. So I don't know if that helps you guys, but I think it's an excellent strategy that whatever you can put together and use that template, I hope that it can offer you something. And what I want to encourage you is at the bottom of this page. There's one of the things that I learned in this journey is I got into a lot of philosophy. And one of the most famous samurai, his name was Miyamoto Musashi, and he fought 62 duels, all undefeated, 1 draw in his life. And these are not, hey, let's fight, you and I, and you're an untrained fighter. These are the best of the best. They were masters at what they did. He said that there is nothing that you can buy or find or acquire outside of yourself that will make you any better, quicker, faster, smarter, or anything. Everything you need to be successful, it's already inside of you. Alan Watts said, the only Zen you're going to find at the top of a mountain is the Zen you take with you. You see? So you already have this, and just like our ancestors, just like these people that stood, if I gave you a sword, and I had a sword, and I said, well, stand up, we're going to have a duel right now. Would you do it with calmness, or would you be pooping your pants?
Pooping our pants.
Exactly. But they did those things. They stood like an iron rod, solid, willing to focus. That you hear this no mind thing. You hear yogis say it. This, by the way, samurai are cousin to yogi, and there's a story behind that I'll tell on another GhettoRig podcast. They approach things with no mind. You saw it in the Last Samurai. There's a line in there where Tom Cruise's character is frustrated, and the little kid runs over, no mind, no mind. And he's trying to tell him, all that nonsense in your head is a lie. You can do things that you think you can't. You see what I mean? Because people are scared of this. This is why I said in the beginning, this is like, I don't want to be a motivational speaker. I feel more like this is a come to Jesus opportunity. Like you have to come to hard truths and realities in order to make big changes. You have to challenge yourself. So key principles to keep in mind. I'm on page 12 now. So by proxy, when we focus on anti-inflammation lifestyle, we automatically reduce fat. If you have played with yo-yo dieting or an anti-inflammation lifestyle shift in focus, it can help you. So there's a I call it a trimurti, which is a Sanskrit word, but it's basically a what do you call in Christianity the Father, Son, Holy Ghost?
The Holy Trinity.
Trinity. It's a trinity, and they kind of feed off of each other. Okay, so it's a combination of food, our activity, and our mobility. We know that we've discussed ways that food contribute to our inflammation. Lack of activity. We spoke about that. And with our lack of activity, we lose range of motion and mobility. So now you've been sitting on the couch for 10 years. Now you don't even want to do anything. Because that's what you're accustomed to. It's a pattern, ritual, habit. You get it? You want me to go to the pier and walk around all day? Are you kidding me? No way. Metabolic flexibility. Man, this is the reverse of what we talked about. When people go on to South Beach, I remember in the 90s, I lived in Miami, and people would do South Beach, and what was the number one reason why they failed? They failed because they couldn't get past metabolic flexibility, meaning that they're addicted to these carbs. And if I tell you, no, you can't have that coffee with a donut and all the sugar and all the cream that goes with it, you're going to miss the meal. Your body's telling you, no, you got to have that stuff. I need the sugar. I need the sugar. No, and you have this insulin crash, and now you're sitting at your desk and you're nodding, and we already know what that's like. That's why we do that. Accidents are higher. There's more plane crashes and auto accidents between 2 o'clock in the afternoon and 4. Why? Because we have this insulin crash after our lunch, after this crazy sugary breakfast, heavy lunch, and now you're sitting at your desk. Who knows what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
That's what that is. Once you clean things up, that will go away. So what is metabolic flexibility? Remember I said we eat something. We have an insulin response. First into our blood sugar, then into our muscle, into our liver, and then what's left over goes into the fat stores. It's the opposite. We're undoing the same thing when we're metabolically flexible. That means that instead of getting the energy from our food that we're eating, we're getting it from our fat stores. Our body prefers this form of energy. So when people tell me, oh no, I can't do that, guess what? Ancient people on a normal basis fasted for 2 and 3 days at a time. You think that people were tracking down mastodons lethargic? I need another Dunkin' Donuts. We think better when we're using our fat stores as a form of energy. So it's the opposite of, we begin fasting. I want to get this straight now. We have the upload of sugar that goes into the blood, the muscle, and then the fat cell. The process reverses, and we have something called leptin. It's a byproduct, it's a hormone that's released in this process. It makes us feel satiated. This is why when you meet people that have a fasting habit and they, well, don't you get hungry? This is why they don't get hungry. It's because this leptin is making us feel satiated. Now it's the opposite with the Dorito example. They manipulate, remember I told you there's archetypes, there are strategies, engineered strategies to make us eat more. What they manipulate is a hormone called ghrelin. Ghrelin makes you feel unsatiated. So it's why in the 1980s, when the first time I ever heard of a Taco Bell was over by East Lake Mall, and is that Temple Terrace? That area? Nobody knows.
No.
Nobody knows Tampa from over here? Okay. My sister, she was a teenager or whatever, and she was talking about Taco Bell, and I remember her saying, yeah, but I don't like eating it because you feel hungry within an hour or two. Now that I know what I know why she said that. I understand it. So this is one of the reasons why we overeat, is because, again, we have this unsatiated ghrelin that's in our bodies, this hormone. So the principle that our bodies first uses the carbohydrates, the glucose in our bloodstream is full as a result of routinely depleting our energy source. Our insulin stabilizes, allowing mood and stress to balance. So insulin, it's a hormone that allows the muscle and the liver to absorb glucose from the blood. Once the muscles and liver are satiated, the glucose is in surplus. The insulin then assists the conversion of this unused energy to store within the fat cells. Once the glucose in the bloodstream is used, the second place our body looks for energy is from the proteins. Glycogen stored in the muscle and in the liver, reversing the cycle of energy storage above. A person with an active lifestyle may require carb loading in order to stay active. So a person who fasts, really, they're usually not going to be a bodybuilder or something like this. If you fast, you might carb load a little bit before you go to your jiu-jitsu, or before you go to your yoga, or before you go to that thing that's going to require some activity from your body. The third and last place our body finds energy is our fat stores. When we start taking withdrawals from our body bank and these years of deposits, do you see where I'm going? So this is how you get yourself on that track. Instead of making deposits, now we're taking withdrawals. And it takes months or years to get to there. If it took you 10 years to become who you are, man, don't think a 1 week or a 30-day. Again, it's a path. It's something that you have to accept as a new normal. That's what you're trying to strive for. Is you're striving for a new normal, trying to reestablish something else. Hormone drive the metabolic fuel partitioning system. In other words, nutrition manipulates our hormones. I put some definitions in here to help you a little bit. I'm going to skip I will do insulin, even though we talked about it. Let's go a little bit more into it. It assists muscles in upload of glucose in the blood and the liver via a process called de novo lipogenesis. Who speaks Latin? That means new fat. Insulin is an entry door to fat cells. Control of insulin is the number one way to manage inflammation and gain control of our habits. It's hands down by far the number one way. It's hands down by far the number one way. It's hands down by far the number one way. I want to make sure that you understand that. Lipogenesis is a metabolic process that infuses stores of energy into fat cells for future use. Hormone-sensitive lipase uses a process called lipolysis to hold the exit door for fat to convert back into usable energy. Lipolysis is the use of fat stores as metabolic fuel. So they're related. Lipolysis and the hormone-sensitive lipase is a hormone that manipulates lipolysis. Leptin, a hormone that makes us feel satiated. We discussed about it. Ghrelin, it's referred to as the hunger hormone because its primary role is to regulate appetite. It stimulates us to eat more and store extra fat. Testosterone. Testosterone is anabolic to muscle and catabolic to fat. It's naturally more present in men, and the reason why men carry more muscle than women. Estrogen is catabolic to muscle and anabolic to fat. It's more predominant naturally in women, and the reason why women store fat differently from men, and also why women have a much harder time building muscle. I used to work at a Bally's. I used to manage one in Miami. And it was amazing to me how many women, I would say more than half of the women that we'd work with would say, yeah, but I don't want to get big. And I'd be like, what are they talking about? Don't they understand how hard it is to get big in the first place? And then they're a woman on top of it? It's so hard for women bodybuilders to do what men can do. Macronutrients are the nutrients that the body requires in large amounts and make up our total caloric intake. They include carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. Micronutrients are the nutrients that are required and include vitamins, minerals, and water. They're primarily found in vegetables, fruits, and lean meats. Electrolytes. It's not good enough that our cells are hydrated. We need a wiring system inside of them, and that's what electrolytes are. That's why when you're low on electrolytes, your muscles can cramp, and you can go into heat stroke, these types of things. It's when the electrical system goes haywire a little bit in our body, and we're required to have them. One of the modalities, I think all you guys, except for you might not know this. One of the things that we have here is our deprivation float tank. And women have this secret that they've been hiding from men with these Epsom salt baths. And now that I've discovered it, and the upload of the magnesium, which is one of our electrolytes, and to me, magnesium and potassium are two most important electrolytes. Magnesium requires that we load, and 90% of the people walking around are deficient in magnesium. But in our deprivation float tank, not only you get the meditative experience, but you get this upload of this magnesium, and as you can, if you just do it yourself or talk to a few people, it feels great. But so our cells have has two entry doors and one exit door, and they're all controlled by hormones. And what we eat manipulates our hormones. So this is our duality sheet. I'm not going to go back over it. So this goes back to now that we have a little bit of information, we're going to go back to this duality, and from this part, and we're on page 15 now. Feel free to take some notes and anything that come to mind, and I encourage you to use this in the future and go back to this and develop a strategy. And you see that I put some blanks here. And so your why, remember we said this, your why is so important. Trying to do something without your why, it's meaningless. So you have to ask yourself these questions. What do you want for yourself? What's your motivation? And what do you want to be? My personal journey was long, and it's not over. I'm still into it, and it's going to go on until I die. And I'm more familiar. Here's the scary part about this. It's so easy to revert back. I'm much more familiar and comfortable with that person that I was than I am this person. Does that make sense? It doesn't? Remember, we're trying to, it was easy to be mindless and unaware and allow that person to develop.
That's another point, yeah.
And I lived that person. I was in that body until I'm 52 now. So let's say, I just said 3 years, so let's say somewhere around 48, 49, I come to these epiphanies. I have that many years of that person. It's easy to be that person. I can step back into that role. Now, I wouldn't want to feel those sensations again of the bloating and the fullness and everything that goes with it. But you see what I mean?
I know what I mean now.
Perfect.
It's like, if you don't know, it won't hurt you. Now you have more knowledge. Now you at least know this.
But it's like an alcoholic. They're very familiar with this place. And it's almost a battle not to go back to that place. It's effort to stay out of that place. Do you see?
Yeah, okay.
So that's, we have to put effort, or nothing's gonna happen. So I also ask a few questions here, because one of the things that happened to me was the day, I love this story. The day I got to the same exact weight that my BMI outlines for my height is 188 pounds. The day I arrived to 188 pounds, I didn't have to take high blood pressure or anything else anymore. No medication. Everything went into normal balance. The very day. I was doing a hot yoga one time at Blend in Safety Harbor, and there's this guy there. And guys in hot yoga, guys are so averse to yoga, they think it's going to make them gay or something. I don't know. And we usually have to rest because we have more muscle, where women can flow through this 60-minute class, you know. And it's amazing to watch. And so there's only three guys in the class. It was me and two other guys. And of course, we're all taking breaks around the same time, and we kind of look at each other, whatever. So I'm in the lobby now, and I'm talking to this guy, and he's got some bloating on him, and we're talking, and I asked him. Sometimes I ask people this question, and they don't know why I'm asking it, but I observe the bloating, so I asked them, well, what do you do about inflammation in your life? And he goes, I don't do anything. He goes, my friends call me 3.0 because I have 3 stents in my heart. And I was like, what? And I was shocked. So he goes, I'm going to live life. He goes, I'm not going to, change my pleasure and trade what I want for myself. And I'm thinking, that's what you want for yourself? He's trying to convince me that this is a good idea, that he's somehow free. And I don't find freedom in the fact that people in boardrooms are making decisions on my behalf. I want to be in control of myself, my destination, my momentum. Where am I going? It's my personal responsibility, and I'm not going to give it to anybody. That's me. And I advise you guys to take how we see things is really important, and you should take a different perspective. Medical conditions. What would an anti-inflammation lifestyle? How would it help you? What would it look like? What freedoms are waiting for you? Again, I discovered so many things that if I'm walking down the beach and there's some kids playing soccer, I can stop and play if I wanted to. I couldn't do that before. Does that make sense? So you will discover opportunities. You have more reasons to get yourself organized and on an anti-inflammation momentum than you even understand or know or can imagine. And again, I'm going to refer back. All the willpower, all the strength, all the patience you'll ever need, it's already inside of you. So on page 16, if a person truly loves themselves, they take responsibility and they care for their own well-being. Jocko Willink, is that what's his name, Jay?
Jocko Willink.
Willink? He has a book called Extreme Ownership. Take ownership. Success happens in a 3-stage cycle of forward momentum, plateaus, and setbacks. So we need to focus on our forward momentum and not be discouraged by the plateaus or the setbacks. It's a matter of being persistent. So we can plan our plateaus. What does that mean? Think about things in cycles. You might say to yourself, the holidays are coming. So you plan on it. You focus on being lean up until the holidays, knowing there'll be indulgent times. I think that month of December, let's say, if you focused on trying to minimize your exposure to these things, you can also just give up and just say, all right, I'm gonna indulge. My family's here, they're gonna be here for 2 weeks, and I'm gonna participate and be involved with everything. You're probably not gonna overdo it, because by then portion sizes and other things will be different in your brain. But you can have points in time where you're on vacation and you can say, this is a plateau. I'm not gonna worry about it. I'm gonna do what I want. You see what I mean? So now setbacks can be discouraging. Setbacks occur when we take our ground and we have to step back. We have to take a loss. Those are going to happen too, but we can't be discouraged by that. We can't say, I'm giving up. Do you see what I mean? So you have your forward momentum. So you want to maximize this forward momentum. And if you study samurai, if you study the Israeli army, if you study any military strategy, when you take ground, the idea is not to go backwards. I used to have a sales team that worked for me, and I would tell them that we sold trinkets and things like that, and we had this countertop display. It was 12 inches by 12 inches. And I told the sales team, I was like, listen, so you opened a new account. You now have a 12 by 12 piece of real estate on their counter. I don't ever want any other product to be on their counter. As a matter of fact, I want to acquire more real estate on their counter. So upsell them. Give them another product to sell. Do you see what I mean? When you gain ground, maintain it, or try to maintain it. Knowing that there will be plateaus, knowing there'll be setbacks, and we shouldn't be discouraged by those. We should keep moving forward and maintain some type of focus. And I like this quote. Peter Sahabi is the TriStar head coach, and he's also the coach for a Hall of Fame UFC fighter named George St. Pierre. They call him GSP. He goes by his initials. And he said once, I've never seen somebody walk into this gym and have a good and perfect, wonderful day every day and make it to the top. So you're going to have these plateaus, these setbacks and things. Does this make sense? And so it's necessary to be great, is to have failure. So now here's another category. We get to barriers. Barriers are, and you know somebody who's hit a barrier. Barriers are, oh, I got to 135, or I got to this weight, or this place, and I just couldn't get past it. And what do? I just gave up. When we find barriers, that's a cue for you to change strategies and say, what can I tweak? How can I maintain where I've come? You're going to maintain it anyway as long as you keep doing the same thing. But what do I need to tweak in order to go beyond it? Does that make sense? So it requires you to be challenged. There's a famous fighter who came and gave a workshop recently, Bushesha, and were you there?
No, I went to that one.
Okay,
he was a Gracie one. That was a good one.
He was talking about, he was in a match with Keenan, and he got him in this particular hold that grabs his leg, and it's like a 12-minute match. He said it took me 8 minutes to figure out how to counter that. So you're gonna run into these places where you're like, I'm not sure what to do, and you have to re-educate yourself. You have to re-analyze and try to see what opportunities are there. Trying too hard can be a burnout. Can anybody relate to that? So face yourself at it at the same time. Remember, we talked about our rededication. It's the plan of action. So on page 17, I show a picture. This is the moment that I knew that my problem was inflammation. And I was in the VA, and it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. It was during COVID, and the reason why my doctor didn't give me an MRI prior to that was because all the resources had been reallocated for COVID. Does anybody need water to use the bathroom or anything? We can go 10 or 15 more minutes? All right, perfect. So the doctor comes in, he goes, just had a cancellation on the MRI, and I can get you in there right now. So he comes out and he shows me that picture. And I'm looking at it, and I don't remember what he said, but it just occurred to me, that's inflammation. And I already knew in my brain somewhere, fasting addresses inflammation. And I walked out of the ER with this idea already. So the plan of action, my plan of action, I had 3 focuses and what I recommend to people. Number 1 is everybody should know what it feels like to have an empty stomach. If we have an empty stomach, we're not bloated. And you might not be into fasting, but you understand where I'm going with it, okay? When you eat, we should focus on nutrient-dense food. Nutrient-dense food is satiating food. Highly processed food is unsatiating. We just spoke about that. And consistency beyond the 50-50 teeter-totter balance that we spoke about. If you're doing this 70 to 90% of the time, you're going to have a different outcome and result. Do you see what I mean? So sometimes consistency, well, we talked about this, social opportunities and things like that. Everybody's solution is different. Perfect. And I give an example on this last page of what you can follow. And what I write up here, I know it doesn't look like an outline, but the person who gave me my strategy wrote exactly pretty much what I have here. What we talked about before. You start the night before in planning, if that was the case, and you go through your day. And no matter what your strategy is, you can have a routine set to your day for hydration and all these things. One of the things that people we'll walk in the door and we offer IV services, and sometimes you hear people say, I'm just not a water drinker. That's a choice. Do you see what I mean? So plan, just like you plan a meal, plan on, I'm carrying my water bottle with me. I'm going to make an effort. I'm going to have a glass of water on my desk. I'm going to make the opportunity for myself. And I did not ask if any questions are going on. I think because of this podcast thing, it's kind of thrown me off. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay. And I also throw in some stuff here at the end. Remember we talked about cortisol? And we talked about the stresses of life. Controlled stress is one thing. As a matter of fact, it's very helpful. If you go into people that come here and they go into cryo and they might have this inflammation idea, but once you get in there, you know what everybody likes is the euphoria. They come out. Ozzy the other day, he's in there, comes out busting through the door in his underwear going, woohoo! Didn't know that somebody had come in the 3 minutes he was inside, but there's a euphoric feeling. Everybody comes out of there and I'm like, here, take another hit. And they laugh, they think it's funny. Because you become a junkie. You get addicted to it. So controlled stress is healthy. What we want to do is we want to learn to control that. So I throw in some breathing techniques here. And this will be part of this. We'll cover this more in the next workshop next month, because the next workshop is going to be a cold plunge challenge, and I'm going to talk you through the strategy of how to do it, because this is the hardest thing in the building to do, is get inside that ice bath, hands down by far. When we're controlling our stress, I was really scared of yoga. I surfed in the 90s a lot, and I lived in Puerto Rico at that time, it's our Hawaii on this hemisphere. It's like our Mecca, and the surfers had already accepted yoga at that time. Kelly Slater, all the big guys were doing it, and I never got into it. And I didn't get into it because I was afraid of the slowing the mind thing down. But once you do it, you kind of get addicted to it. So, and it's also is a stress reliever and manages cortisol. When I took my ice bath challenge, the guy that facilitated it is a Wim Hof certified guy, and a lot of times as a yoga teacher, you get this question, and the question is, what's the right way to breathe? In through the nose, out through the mouth, in the nose, out the nose. Like, what is it? Because you hear all these stories, and when this guy talked about this question, his answer was great. He goes, I hear Wim Hof's voice in my head, and he says, just breathe, damn it. Just breathe. So conscious breathing is hands down by far the most powerful modality that you can use in your behalf. here I give some examples. There's box breathing, and there's two little examples that I give in there. But try to find opportunity to slow everything down and just focus on your conscious breath. How I started it is I would try to get to 10. And of course, by the second breath, your monkey mind is already, she knows. And it's going somewhere. Oh, I need to pay that parking ticket or whatever. It just comes into your head, and just accept that it's there, allow it to go, and try to relax it and be in the same moment. If we're living in some type of depression, we're carrying some trauma with us. If we're living in anxiety, we're concerned about some outcome that's undetermined. But when we can stay in the present moment, our depression can subside, our anxiety can subside, and we learn to control the present moment. So again, I think the tool of that, it's like when you get in the deprivation float tank. I tell people, when you get in there, focus on your breath for a few moments, and then start a body check. So there's two distractions of the mind that put you in the moment. Does that make sense? And you can practice that without being in that tank. This is something that you can do on your own. And I put some options here in the back. One of the things we have to, I talk about leptin supporting proteins, and I give you the examples of me. They can be way different from you. Carbohydrates and fats. And I put this minestrone down here as an example. I had a guy once in a workshop say, he's a single guy, but he's like in his 60s. He's an older gentleman. And for convenience reasons and out of habit and ritual and his personal taste, he ate pasta every single day. And he said, this is something I would like to break. And he said, what do you recommend me? And I didn't know how to answer him at that particular moment. And it took me a few weeks, and I still know the guy. We're friends and everything. And so eventually I called him up and said, hey, make minestrone soup. And what did minestrone soup do for him? It was an introduction to him to these bone broths. And there's a strategy behind bone broths that I like. And if you look at key point number 2, when I talk about when you eat nutrient-dense food, it's satiating. Bone broth is nutrient-dense. It has collagen. Collagen represents 30% of the protein in our bodies. Our body does a really bad job of converting meat to collagen. So it's why we get tendinitis and things like that. But if you're consuming these collagens, now you're feeding the tendons and the ligaments. Just like a bodybuilder wants to eat protein, wants to eat muscle to feed his muscle. If you want your tendons and ligaments and joints to be in good condition, you got to have collagen. Again, we don't do the conversion from meat to collagen, but from collagen to muscle, it's a lot easier for our body to make that transition. So so Ed takes this and he runs with it. And so now, instead of eating an entire bowl of pasta, he's reduced the amount of carbohydrates, because you just have a handful of pasta in the entire soup. So he gets the feeling like he has something Italian going on. And he gets this nutrient upload. Now he replaced the meal ease that came from him eating pasta, just boiling it. Now you got a pot and you wash it and it's kind of done. He does with soups, and his soup has now his soup venture has now broadened into these Asian soups and all these different options that we can make with this. So that's why I threw that in there to give that contrast. Does anybody have anything to ask or to share or to like and subscribe? No, I'm kidding. But any questions or anything?
I have a question. This week, personally, I kind of fell off with healthy eating and exercise, and it has to do with menstruation, so I'll try to get it to apply to everybody. I was bloated, but it wasn't because of what I ate, it was because of what my body was going through. And as I was bloating, I'm like, oh, fine. Well, I'm already bloating, so I'll just have an extra glass of wine. Fine, I'll have the cookies. And
well,
I
remember,
fell off.
You're on vacation too.
Well, that's true.
Okay.
But so, what would you give the same advice as far as limiting or eliminating bloating if it's not food caused? So, say you're bloating due to menstruation or inflammation due to bruising or an impact. How would you try to eliminate that the same way with these certain kinds of foods? and
Well,
exercise and movement. I'm like, what's a quick fix is what I'm really getting at.
I don't know the answer to the question if there is a quick fix, and I can't relate, for obvious reasons. But what I would say is this reminds me of what we're talking about allergies. We're talking about now. This is a type of inflammation that is natural, and we kind of don't have a lot of control with. Like right now, our trees are blooming. They're confused. They think it's spring already and it's February. Yeah, I'm not sure how you can do that. But I also see why there would want to be a control effort. I wouldn't know. I'd have to research and put some thought into it and see if there's something that can be done. But it's certainly something you could research yourself.
Right, and so more so the mental acceptance of, well, that's one of the plateaus, and don't beat yourself up over it, and don't fall off. Expect it. You know, like
It's
you
normal.
said.
Well, the first thing that I thought, I didn't know you were going to go the menstruation route. I thought to myself, oh, she's probably just talking about being on vacation, and we killed a 6-pack and a beer or a pizza by ourselves or something. But yeah, I think that there's nothing wrong with having an extra glass of wine or something like that if it's appropriate for the time. But when you find yourself in that cycle, you see. So yeah. Does that?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else have something to say, comment?
Well, we have to thank you, man.
How do you feel about it? How do you feel
It's a
about
lot
the
of
presentation?
information here. A lot of good information.
It's a lot of information. It can be confusing, and I just tried to go over just the simple basics. I'm trying not to tell anybody what to do, how to live, but it's a puzzle. And it's a hard puzzle. This is why I explain we don't know how to do hard things anymore. But if we try, we can get somewhere with it. So this is the way. Now, how does it tie into vitality? So just like you go to the gym, and I'm positive every single person in the room can identify with what I'm talking about. You go to the gym, and if you go one time again, you feel good, you know. But after you've gone for a couple weeks, you'll walk up the gym, and you'll say, "Man, I'm not going to go home and have whatever I want to eat. I want to complement what I'm doing." So, how does vitality fit into this? Every single modality that we offer has something to do with inflammation, and I want you to treat it like you would your gym. I'm going there. I'm getting a certain percentage of relief and benefit, but I want to complement it when I'm not here, when I'm outside of the door. I want to walk more.
Follow up.
I want to follow up. I want to have a better nutrition approach. I want to have, this guy goes on hikes that last a day at a time. You know, I wish I had those opportunities to go up into the mountains, and I'm envious when he's telling me these stories. To me, it sounds exotic and beautiful and contemplation. He spoke about it as if, when he was first telling me about it, as if, I traded one thing for this, almost as if it was a negative, but of course he has his positive reason for doing it. Where for me, I was like, wow, it's a really important thing in yogic principle is to spend time in nature, contemplation, all of these things. So, find those opportunities. And everything is a baby step. The person who says, oh, I'm changing my life on Wednesday or January 1st or whatever, how many stories have you guys heard of that? And how many of those accompanied with failures? Pretty much all of them. Yeah. So you have to look for incremental steps, and I'll give you some examples. Who knows who Mike Pompeo is? Who was he Attorney General?
Attorney General.
Was he Attorney General?
Something like that, yeah.
I believe he was Attorney General for Bush, second Bush.
I think he did it for Obama and for. No, you got it right.
I think it was under.
Bush, George W.
Well, if you know who he is, he's lost a bunch of weight recently, and somebody was interviewing him, a reporter, who had something to do. It was a political interview, but at the end of the interview, he's like, "Hey, I noticed you slimmed down a lot. Like, what are you doing?" And you know what his answer was? He said it's the little decisions you make every day changed his life. I know, you know, who's the magician pair?
Penn and Teller.
Penn and Teller. The big one, the tall guy with the glasses and the deep voice. He lost a bunch of weight. And when you listen to his story, he says, I eat whatever I want. But I just happen to want something different than when he was that person. So again, he's created a new normal for himself. I want my soups. I want my sardines. Even though people run away from me when you open the can. You know, I want those things. I enjoy them. I enjoy the way I feel. I enjoy the quality of life. I enjoy that I don't get injured in jiu-jitsu. And we were installing the cryo machine every single night. Somebody'd run over there and grab a pizza, and somebody'd go over there and get a 12-pack of beer, and we probably had 5, 6, 7 guys here at a time, and it was for us to stay late, and we were here until 10, 11, 12 every night. And so now we're wrapped up. We get the cold tanks installed, and I'm like, I'm going to be the first one in this thing, So I'm in there, and I'm having a guy film, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, you're bloated, dude. I'm not putting this on Instagram or anything like that. I was like, I'll wait a few weeks and redo it when I don't look like this. Now, maybe you guys don't even notice it, but I saw it. You see what I mean? I can tell when it's in me because I know the difference. And that's what it was. It was that week, and I accepted it. That I'm at your house, and you offer me something I might not usually eat. I'm gonna sit and eat it. You see? So you choose these moments. It's these little decisions, and learn to create new normals. And it takes a long time. So, is there any other comment?
So you want me to regret that I want a pizza over there, right?
I don't want you to regret it, but don't beat yourself up about it.
My wife is craving for it. Where's she?
I think Emily has some for you over back there in the back. So, guys, thank you so much for coming. I think I
say, I'm addicted to sugar, and I stopped sugar. I'm sorry for my accent. I stopped sugar this week for 4 days, and I have headache in the morning almost every day before I stop. After I'm not eating sugar, only 4 days my headache stopped. Last night with the big party in my house, I drink piña colada, wine, sancocho, Dominican food, the sancocho. Of course, this morning I have the headache. Because it was only 4 days. I'm pretty sure after a longer time I won't have that.
You have to drink pinch.
I got it.
You have to switch the wine for a scotch.
exactly a good scotch with a good filter.
I agree with that.
And don't mix alcohols. You can't have a beer and then wine and then a shot. No, I'm kidding.
That's where all the fun is, though.
Exactly.
And the thing is, she likes some very sugary, things, and she drinks too fast. Pina colada, oh, it's good, bean, and I have a lot of alcohol in it.
Well, it has a lot of sugar. I think the sugar is the big thing. So guys, thank you for coming, and check out, share the link, the GhettoRig link, and you guys were always available. If you can just email us at info@Vitality St. Pete. Myself and Ozzy and Kieran, we monitor that email, and so any questions you guys might have, I'm glad to respond to it. They'll make sure, if I don't see it myself, they'll make sure that I get it. All right?
Thank you. Thank you very